Hi everyone and welcome to Obux Presents. My name is Ben Crabe and today I've got Eoin Scolard, who's one of our authors and who last December published The Possibility Exists With Us, which tells the story about how he trusted his intuition and walked away from a six-figure salary. The Possibility Exists is a practical and sometimes humorous look at how his concept of self was broken open and how he learnt profound spiritual and philosophical concepts from unlikely sources. He teaches the HQ process, a 5-month in-depth process designed to awaken you, nurture you, challenge you, support you, and ultimately help you become whole again. Welcome, Eoin.
Hi, Owen.
Oh, Owen. Okay,
that's all right. People call me all kinds of things. No worries.
I'm just going to crack on.
Sure.
You're interested in helping us become whole again. And in your book, you talk about how we all want it and we all want that kind of happiness, yet we're all so scared and reluctant of doing it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I suppose I can't give one simple answer, so maybe there's a few different ways of looking at that, Ben.
Yeah.
My own experience is that certainly, when we get into adulthood, we've already kind of assimilated a whole kind of host of experiences, a whole host of different ways of looking at the world, where essentially our society, our structures, our religion, our parents, our authority figures have modeled a way for us to be. And we tend to kind of follow a similar path to them. And so all of those experiences, I suppose, are kind of hardwired into our psyche. And we tend to act out of those ways of being. But ultimately, we come to some point in our lives where we realize, that doesn't work for me anymore. And then we begin the process of looking at, okay, what needs to be let go of and in order maybe to awaken the authentic me. And letting go of stuff that's kind of familiar, even though it mightn't work too well for you, and letting go of beliefs that you've had for a long time, that can be quite challenging to us because it's kind of within our comfort zone.
Absolutely, yeah. So, how we're grown up and what we're taught, create some of these ingrained beliefs that we get attached to and we get very comforted by, but ultimately don't help us.
They don't help us, yeah. And I think that's, for me, the best way of kind of approaching having a kind of a look at yourself internally is to use one particular energy. And I say, use the energy of curiosity. Just to be kind of curious about what's going on in your mind, for instance, to be curious about what's going on in your heart, to be curious about the sensations in your body. That energy of curiosity, I find, opens me up a lot, because quite often, even when we discover ways of thinking, we begin to beat ourselves up for thinking that way. If we discover a negative way of thinking or a fear-based thought, we start beating ourselves up. And so I say, please don't do that. To anybody I work with, please don't beat yourself up anymore. The world will want to do that for you. Your mind will want to do that. Just be curious when we begin to notice the stories in our minds or the fear-based thinking, or the ways that we close off from life. Just be curious. And that's a great beginning for most people, Ben.
Yeah, and as you were speaking there, I thought often, even if we haven't put much thought to development or spiritual development or anything like that, most of us have habits that we don't like, and we say, why do I always do that? Or why, when I get in a relationship, do I always do that? And that's what you're saying. That's like the beating yourself up part, really, isn't it? And what you're saying is we should be curious when we feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's useful to be curious. I like your analogy too, because it reminds me sometimes of, if you imagine a ship kind of steaming a certain course, and it's kind of on track, and then the ship needs to alter course. It takes a lot of energy for that ship to alter course. It's gathered a momentum, and every life has a momentum. And momentum really is all the moments in your life that have brought you to this moment. And so this is the momentum. And then you say, okay, I want to shift a bit. It takes a bit of effort. And it takes a bit of time. And for some people, because we live in a world that's very, very busy and we want everything quickly, for some people, they don't have the patience or the discipline to kind of stick with it, that change of course. And so we go back then to the familiar. And as you said, we go back to the same relationship patterns and so on, even though we know it's not working.
That's such a good point, because we want to change now, and it's easy to get dispirited if you make the same mistake and it's a mistake, and it's good to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. It's practicing, isn't it, really?
Well, it is, and that's why more and more in my own work, Ben, I like to take people through a process over a period of months. You mentioned the HQ, the holistic intelligence process at the beginning there. That's 5 months. And the reason for that really is that I don't believe in these kind of change your life in 7 days stories. You may have an understanding, but to integrate the understanding takes daily action. And then finally, when the understanding is integrated, your new life kind of really begins. But people have so many concepts, and we all know that we want to be happy, and we all know we should let go of thoughts. But the actual discipline of taking action and doing those things that you need to do finally steers the ship to a new course. Yeah.
I wondered, in your book, it's a mixture of kind of practical teaching about what you're talking about here, but a lot of your own personal experience. And I'm interested in this idea of difficulty and psychological turmoil, and how in your case psychological turmoil was kind of a big catalyst for change in your life, and I think this is really important for people who are going through those kind of stresses and finding it painful. Can you talk about how some of the ways that happened for you?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's happened, I suppose, a number of times. I've kind of hit that brick wall, if you could put it that way, or things have collapsed in my life, and I've been left with the question, what am I doing? What am I doing here? And I think some of us, particularly if you're a slow learner, because I think I was a very slow learner, it's almost like I have to be kind of hit quite hard a few times. Now, that's not true for everybody, but for me, sometimes I was on a particular course, we'll say the business course, where I was going after the Porsche, going after all of the money. I was a finance director, and everything was kind of going well in that life. But it's almost like I was so single focused on that, other aspects of my life I wasn't paying much attention to. And so when a business collapses, or you walk out of a job, or whatever happens, you're left with this kind of empty space. And in that empty space, there's turmoil. And I think for any of us, when we're used to kind of thinking a certain way, being a certain way, getting up every day, doing the day job, whatever it is, if we take all that away, then we're left with this space, or this emptiness, as the Buddhists would call it. And to kind of go into the emptiness is a real challenge. But I have found that once I go into that place, that's where the real kind of creativity comes from. That's where the real kind of moments of awakening come from. When I can embrace that sense of emptiness. Because our minds love to be kind of fixated on things. Whether it's the things that I want, the things that I desire, whether it's the things that I'm doing, or whether it's the things that just we don't like in the world, but we're always fixated on something. So that kind of emptiness, that kind of sense of being broken open is very challenging. What happened for me once when I ended up in intensive care, when I had a big collapse, and I thought I was dying. I was in intensive care. There was 2 people in the room, and the second person did die. And then a day later, they wheeled another person in, and then a day later, that person died. So I was in that place of not knowing, am I going to die? Am I going to survive? And in those few days, I really had to reevaluate my life, because I was very broken. I was very confused. I didn't understand really where I was going, even though my kind of ship was on that course. It obviously didn't work for me. So I had to question a lot of the things that I thought about myself, about relationships, about work, about love, about the world. And in that place, I began to awaken. But it is painful. It can be very painful for some people to be broken open. But if you're a slow learner like me, maybe that's what has to happen.
Yeah, and I can relate to learning slowly. I think you said you began to awaken, and on Obux Presents, we talk about spiritual awakening a lot. So how does that? What's the experience of awakening for you? Can you flesh it out a little bit, and how that happened?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd say at the start, Ben, it's always quite difficult to put into words things that I've experienced that maybe others haven't. So bear with me. One of the key ways I suppose I help people to understand what's going on is just to ask them to close their eyes and, you know, to say to themselves hello in their minds. And then when they open their minds, I say, were you able to say hello? And they say yes. And I say, were you able to hear yourself saying hello? And they say yes. And I said, okay, so here's the voice in your mind, and here's you hearing it. And already there's a little bit of distance there between the mind and that aspect of ourselves we might call awareness or consciousness that's able to be aware of what's going on. So many of us are identified with our minds, you know, that we haven't actually taken that time to kind of look at it and realize, you know what, it's just programming. It's just a narrative that runs me, but it's not me. So, you know, that little bit of space between your mind and the awareness of your mind is important. And for me, awakening is, I suppose, a moment when we realize, wow, you know, I'm not my thoughts. I'm just not my thoughts. They're just thoughts, but I am something completely different. Now, what that is, I'm not going to offer you kind of an esoteric explanation of that today. I can't grasp it with my mind. It's so immense, but I have a sense of it now, you know. And so my mind is something separate to the deeper me, the authentic me, you know, and I'm able to observe my mind more and more and more. And that's very useful when, for most of us, the programming is quite negative, is quite fearful. And so for me now, it's like, okay, a thought comes along and it's a little bit like a cloud in the sky. And I can see it coming. And if it's a thought that doesn't serve me, it almost kind of just passes me by, or I might have to give it a little flick to move it on a bit. But if it's a thought that really does serve on, then I can invite it deeply into my heart, into my body, and I can work from there.
That's such a good point. You're right. It's tricky to explain, but incredibly powerful once understood. I remember when I started realizing that a thought of mine didn't, you know, I did before a long time ago. My thoughts were so real, and every thought I had, I believed, and if it was a negative thought, I believed it, and then causes a lot of stress. But if a thought that, you know, when I realized that a thought that didn't serve me, I didn't have to believe, or that there was a space behind my thoughts, you know, a tiny space behind my thoughts, that was huge change. And you almost don't have to say much more than that, really, in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to get words to describe these things. I know that Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now talks about the idea that when we look out into space, we can see all of the planets, we can see the suns, we can see the galaxies, but we can also see there's this incredible amount of space out there, you know, and we all know that now as a fact. And, you know, if we turn the microscope kind of inside, we can see the very same thing. The very same phenomenon is going on in our physical bodies. We are 98%, or whatever percentage it is, 98.5. I don't know if they've actually come up with the exact number, but most of us is space. You know, and then there's objects kind of in that space. And Eckhart would call that the kind of the formless, which is the space, and the form, which is the objects. And the mind loves the objects. The mind loves the form because it can attach to those. The mind doesn't really get space. And that's why I think we become so identified with our minds, with object consciousness, you know, with seeking things, going after things, resisting things, because it's like the things themselves kind of create our experience of life. So I would suggest become aware of the space.
Yeah, and that's what the exercise you explained briefly, and saying hello inside your head, that's noticing the voice in your head and the space there.
Yeah, there's a space that everything has to drop into. You know, I play guitar quite a lot, so I love playing the guitar, but I've realized, of course, that every note I play on the guitar lands in a space, and without the space, the note wouldn't exist. So there's a backdrop to everything. And I suppose beginning to be more and more aware of that backdrop removes you from, you know, the busy mind, from the negativity, from the obsession with things, from that kind of grasping energy. And you begin to realize, wow, there's a depth here that I can actually feel into, that I can actually begin to experience. And it feels very open. It feels very loving. It feels very, very spacious, obviously, and feels very full of potential for me. There's a lot of possibility in that place. Whereas if we're on a fixed course all the time, there isn't much possibility except getting to that destination, wherever it is you're going. and that may not be where you want to end up.
And that space you mentioned inside that's open and it feels full of possibilities and it's kind of loving and peaceful.
Yeah.
We all have that, right? It's not something you can get. It's there for all of us.
It's there. It's. I think it's for every human being to experience that would be really a beautiful thing. I think every human being has that capacity. But of course, we've forgotten that. And people often say that we've forgotten who we really are. I know for myself, when I had my first grandchild was born last year, Ben, and when I looked into her eyes, I was able to almost feel this space because there was no defense in her eyes. There was no narrative. There was no story. There was this kind of pure kind of availability, if you want to call it that. And it's lovely to experience that. And it's very easy for most humans to relate to that we can see that availability, that space within a newborn child. And what happens, of course, is that life comes along and the space gets closed off in different ways. And we build up these layers and layers and layers. And in my book, I talk a little bit about some of the unlikely teachers that taught me. And one of them was Shrek in that great movie.
Yeah.
Where he talks about the layers. He talks about the onion. Ogres are like onions. And I love to look at, ordinary practical examples that can show us maybe on a different level a little bit of truth. We are like onions. We do have layers. And I'm very interested in what's underneath all the layers. And I see that in newborn children. But I don't see it in a lot of adults because we're so used to closing off. We're so used to defending. We're so used to hardening. And for a lot of people, they're looking for their soul purpose. They're looking to awaken. And I would say to them, just notice what's in the way because it's already there. It's not that you need to seek outside for it. It's already in here. And really just find all the barriers. Find all the ways that you're closing off. And then you land there someday. Yeah, and it's a lovely place to land in. And for me, enlightenment isn't necessarily just a state of being because I think we all have moments of enlightenment. It's like, can I maximize those moments? Can I sit in that place more and more and more often? And that's why a little bit of practice and discipline is necessary.
I think that's a really good point because if someone's here listening to this and watching this and they're interested in spirituality and they're interested in enlightenment, it's very easy to think that it's some rarefied, far-off thing which is incredible. One day I might get there. And you say we all have moments of it where, all of us, whatever our interests,
do. Well, I think we all have it. And maybe we don't recognize it. Yeah. And it's quite a simple thing. I think some people like to put it up as some kind of wonderful concept and a beautiful state of being, of bliss. And it's not necessarily that. We've experienced it, for instance, I know when I used to run quite a lot, I'd get to mile 5 or 6. And then by mile 9, I might have realized I haven't had a thought in 3 miles. I've been totally here, totally present, in the zone, I suppose it's called. And for me, that's a kind of a similar experience where you're very, very, very present and the mind is incredibly quiet. Yeah. Quieting the mind, I think, is the biggest challenge we have today because everything is kind of grasping at the mind. Everything, images, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, there's just so much now that we can get involved in. But the more we get involved in that, the more we leave that kind of deep center, that place inside us that is spacious, that is open, that is quiet, and that ultimately, is incredibly peaceful and incredibly powerful too. Yeah. But it's like we're like magpies. We're just picking up stuff all the time. Even the words like Twitter, it kind of does my head in. Twitter. It's, there's no substance in it. There's no depth in it. It's very surface. And so a lot of us live our lives on that surface. And yet underneath there's this immense depth, this breadth, this possibility.
That's very clearly, succinctly put. Thank you. In your book, there's you outline lots of important kind of points and concepts which can help us get there. Really, peel back those layers, understand the mind. One of the things which I think everyone can relate to is one of the points in the book. Our minds have convinced us that there's something missing, and so many of us have that sense. There's something missing, and I hear it. My friends say there's something missing right now. And it's, how does that fit into awakening and then understanding our mind?
Well, right. There's a number of things I suppose I could say about that. But one of the first things that came to me while you were talking, Ben, was one of my favorite teachers is Osho. And Osho, who's now dead, but Osho talks quite bluntly sometimes, and I love the way that he puts things across, because his images can be quite visceral, and then I remember them. So one of his images is, listen, take the sword down off the wall. He said, cut your head off, put it underneath your arm, and he said, live from here. So it's live from the heart and the gut. Live from here, walk around headless, and see what life is like, and experience it without the narrative, without the story that there's something missing. And just see what that is like for you. Because ultimately, there's something missing is just a story in your mind. And I think it's a product of the ego, which just needs to grasp. It's one of the, I think, qualities of the ego is this kind of grasping energy. I need something more. There's never enough. Never enough time, never enough money, never enough love. There's got to be more out there. And it's that kind of grasping quality that takes us away. So Osho would say, cut your head off. I'm not suggesting you do this, by the way, anybody who's watching. It's just an analogy. Put your head underneath your armpit and just see, can you live from a deeper place? And notice what that's like. And every time your head kind of wants to butt in, just pat it, maybe rub it down and say, okay, I hear you, but I'm not going there. I'm going to stay here. And just to notice what that is like for you,
And to clarify also, doesn't mean you don't make changes in your life, or if you need to get change your job, you do that, or address an issue in your relationship, you can do that. It's about not living from that voice that's telling you, I need more, I need more, I need more. I'll be happy when I get more. And you can still change and make your life better, but you're losing that restlessness, and you're realizing you don't have to be so restless all the time.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things that I'm aware of is the difference between a desire. Desire is very healthy. Don't get me wrong here. Desire is very healthy. But for me, if you can think about it energetically, desire for me tends to be kind of felt somewhere in the belly area. There's a real desire. If you look at it from a kind of a chakra perspective, the second chakra is the seat of desire, the wanting. So we're programmed to move towards pleasure. That's the way we are. And we're programmed to move away from pain. So wanting is quite a healthy thing. But it's the attachment to it that causes the problem, that I have to have for my happiness. When this happens, then I'll be happy. And that's the trick that the ego mind plays on us. Whereas the desire, kind of in its essence, is lovely. And then acting on that desire means change will happen. But I think a lot of our actions are actually based on fear-based stories in our head, like, I need more money. I would challenge that. And work out maybe, is it true? Challenging your mind, I think, is always a beginning for people. And then when you realize maybe that doesn't work for me, tuning into desire and seeing, can you stay with the feeling of desire and what it gives you, rather than having to have the thing itself. Because for me, that's the ultimate, I suppose, truth, is that when we feel, we'll say happy or fulfilled or whatever, that's all we really need. We want the feeling. And we think the thing itself gives us the feeling, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe the feeling itself is more important. Can I sit in that place of not knowing, not necessarily having everything I want, but still feeling that kind of healthy desire, but be very sure that you don't have to have it for your happiness. And that's quite tricky again, this idea of non-attachment. And, I don't go with renunciation at all, which a lot of the older religions have taught for so long. I go with a mixture of, I suppose, Buddha and Zorba the Greek. The earthly pleasures are very important to me. My body loves pleasure. I desire, and that's healthy. But it's the attachment that causes the suffering. If we can drop the attachment, the needing to have, the belief that something is missing, then you land in a place of, wow, it's all okay. Everything is unfolding perfectly. And my desire will lead me towards what's right for me.
Yeah, so it's about really becoming very conscious and changing our relationship to our desires.
Yeah, because we desire connection, for instance. You know, and that's lovely. We desire to cooperate. We don't really want to fight. We don't want to have wars in the world. We don't want to damage other people. You know, and if you cut the head off and listen to your heart, it becomes very clear that the voice of your heart is very different to the voice of your head, which is maybe a programmed, fearful, negative voice. And so when, you know, we realize that that's actually happening and we don't listen to the mind and we listen to the voice of our heart, we find different qualities. Yeah. You know, we find that, wow, I love to connect. I love to love. I love to be loved. Yeah. You know, I love to be alive. That in itself becomes
the joy of living. So in your book, The Possibility Exists, and in your work as a practitioner, you know, so we've been talking about peeling back the kind of concepts and layers of beliefs that kind of harden you up here in your mind, living from around your heart and your sort of your guts in your body, and experiencing, you know, a natural kind of happiness and contentedness there. But I just want to change gears slightly, because I saw on your YouTube channel, I saw you did a lot of spiritual talk is about the lovely stuff, happiness and the love and the bliss, and but I thought you talked very well about, we still sometimes experience the ugly stuff sometimes, anger and passion and intensity, and that can be pretty scary and often perceived as very negative. But I thought you talked really well about anger and really its positive role and how we can really embrace it. I wonder if you could say something about that side of things as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, that there's certainly a lot of beliefs, world beliefs, religious beliefs around some of the kind of stronger emotions. I break the emotions into yin and yang, and so in the yang side, you know, there's anger and there's frustration, and sometimes they're actually great messengers for us. They're showing us something about ourselves, because we have there's a lot of negative press about anger, but ultimately anger as an emotion in its purity, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, it's what we do with it is what causes the problem. And then you're right, it does become ugly, but ultimately the anger itself is pointing to something. So for me, anger, power, and passion are very, very close. And, you know, and anger tends to arise when maybe a boundary has been crossed. So for people who perhaps don't have healthy boundaries, they need to be able to access their anger, you know, or maybe a need is not being met in a particular situation. And if your needs are not being met, anger will arise. But then how to use that productively, intelligently, and in a way that kind of deepens the communication with the other person, that's a real skill. But the anger itself is not the problem. You know, it's what we do with it in the world. So for instance, you know, I live in the countryside here, and, you know, if my dog wanders into the field next door, at the moment there's a lot of cows and calves in there, the cows will attack our dog, and they've done it. You know, the mothers will attack. They get very angry because there are boundaries being crossed, or you could look at it this way, they have a need to feel safe. And so when that need is broached, anger arises, and they will charge, and our dog is quite large, and he runs away. So I'm not saying, and nobody could look at that and say, oh, that's a really bad thing. Your anger is really bad. Of course it's not. It's a healthier response to a situation where maybe a need is not being met or a boundary is being crossed. And then we just say, hey, you've come far enough. That's it. There's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately for most of us, we don't have enough what I call ground in ourselves, Ben. So the anger actually comes in and it takes us over. And so we become the anger, and our behavior reflects that. And so that's why for me, you know, this idea of being grounded and being present is very, very, very important. Otherwise, the emotions themselves will take you away. And I see it a lot, to be honest, in people who are spiritual, because I'm not quite sure if I am spiritual anymore as a term, because people tend to look at that in a way that maybe I don't agree with anymore. You mentioned the sweetness, the lightness, all of that, and the smiling and all that kind of stuff. For me, no, I'm human as well. So I'm a human being, and I'm also a spiritual being. And it's the fusion of those two that gives me the kind of aliveness and the vibrancy that I enjoy. So if an emotion arises, the idea is, have I enough ground in myself to kind of tune into it and see what message it's giving me, rather than, we say, if it's sadness, collapse into it. Rather with anger, go and hit somebody. It's like, okay, what is this showing me? So we need that ground in ourselves, which again brings me back to the point that we need some kind of practices to kind of build that ground so that we can experience the emotion, but we don't need to act out of it.
I love what you say. I'm, the spiritual being and the human being, and just because you might be interested or feel spiritual awakening, you don't stop being human. And I've definitely, you're right, seen it in. There's a term, spiritual bypassing. It's like I have a spiritual side, but I don't have any human stuff. I don't ever get angry anymore or have a desire. I've just, and that's not healthy ultimately. And we need to embrace all our human beingness, and as well as have the lovely spiritual side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that term, spiritual bypassing, reminds me a lot of my own kind of religious upbringing, where effectively, certain things were just totally bypassed. I was watching a series last night in BBC called Broken, and it's about a Catholic priest, and it's quite harrowing. But he goes at one stage to another priest who's since retired, who actually abused him, and he speaks to him, and the other priest, of course, denies it all, and then eventually says, but the body isn't important anyhow. The soul is what's important. And that's a similar thing. I think a lot of the religions, bypassed the body, bypassed healthy desire, and went into a place where, this human experience was almost nothing, it wasn't important. And then, of course, we bought into the belief that suffering was in some way healthy. And I see that in some of the Eastern traditions too. This idea of kind of living a very austere life is somehow more spiritual. I just don't hold with that. I really don't. For me, I'm here to be alive. And that means to be alive in my body, to be alive in my emotions, to be alive in my heart, in my behavior, in my voice, in my thoughts. I want to be fully alive. And that means a fusion of the earthly dimension and the spiritual dimension.
I'm singing from the same hymn sheet here. I think to be fully alive, to be fully yourself is beautiful. And for me, the body and grounding and being on the earth is really important. And for me, just going to the gym is a big thing for me. Going into my garden, and just feeling the ground. Just feeling the ground beneath my feet is an important grounding for myself. How do you teach grounding? How do you like to ground yourself? How do you think good ways we can feel really grounded? And so when the tough stuff happens, when the anger flares up, when you feel some jealousy or something, we can be grounded and not let it run our lives. Sure,
yeah. Yeah, well, for me, just speaking personally, I live in the countryside here, so I grow my own kind of organic veg, or myself and my partner Jenny do. I love growing my raspberries. They're my babies. So there's a lot of connection. There's a lot of touch with the earth. Everything is organic. Everything is recycled. So I feel a real connection to the earth. And that really helps me. And again, it's not a mental concept. You've got to experience it. What does it feel like, we say, to be with your potatoes? And I really mean that, to be with them. What does it feel like just to sit outside and listen to the birds? We have thousands of birds here, and this year there's a lot of bees have returned, which is great. We planted particular flowers and so on, which have attracted in lots of bees. So there's a lot of life around. There's a vibrancy around in the earth's plane, and to sense into that gets my energy more grounded. For people who don't live in the country, I have a number of practices. One in particular that certainly I ask people to maybe take on board and to practice 4 or 5 times a week. And it's a mixture of different things. I can't really explain it on video, but it does involve spending time in the body while you're meditating. For me, I've always found meditating difficult. Don't know about you, Ben, but the idea of sitting and thinking nothing, I wasn't able to do it. So I had to find ways of kind of quietening my mind. So I began, for instance, by doing a lot of fried rhythms dancing, which is basically where your body moves and you work up through an energy wave. And at some point, usually in those energy waves, I realized, wow, my mind has gone quiet again. So that was one way of connecting for me. And then I did a lot of work with a Tai Chi master. And so I fused the different things together. And so I suggest to people that, if you're going to meditate, maybe meditate while you're standing, because you can't really fall asleep. And I give people a certain standing position, a chi standing position. I give them a mantra to work with. And so we're engaging the mind with the mantra. We're engaging the breath with a particular practice I ask them to do. And we're standing as well. And so it takes a lot of focus to be in that place. And it quietens the mind hugely and builds a real ground with the body. So for me, meditating, kind of sitting down, has never really worked because the body isn't engaged enough.
You mentioned the 5 rhythms. I know people who've gone to that and who absolutely love it, but it's about moving your body. It's not doing a dance routine, it's spontaneously moving your body with the music. I know people who've gone to it because, especially in England, we're not necessarily brought up to freely move our bodies to music. People feel very awkward, a little bit uptight when they first go, thinking this is a bit weird what people are doing. And then after maybe a few sessions, they realise they're the guy completely losing it and completely feeling the music, and they absolutely love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think music for some people is the portal into kind of, really feeling with your body. And I think every human being that I've ever seen loves to dance, but usually it only happens after quite a bit of alcohol. So if I go to a wedding and so on, and the dancing starts, quite often I'll be first up on the dance floor because I don't really drink much at all. And the dance floor is half empty. And then, of course, by 11:30, it's full. And so people are being very kind of open and dancing and moving because their inhibitions have gone. So we do love to move. I mean, our physical body, when we connect with it, it loves to do things. It loves to move. And it loves that freedom of expression. And to be able to find that without needing the alcohol to kind of break out of your inhibitions, that means you're kind of very free in your body. And it's lovely to see. And I know I've seen it a lot in my own kind of journey in different dances that I've done with people, where people are totally free just to be themselves and to allow the body to express itself. But, it's not a socially, I suppose, normal thing to let your body just express what needs to be expressed.
Yeah, and if we're talking about moving our body as a way of grounding ourselves, it doesn't just have to be something inverted commas spiritual like Tai Chi or yoga. It could be playing football or tennis or something, would you say?
Well, it could be, but again, I think for some people that's a challenge, because I know people that do a lot with their bodies, but the doing is coming from a different place. So, I mean, we see people who've run marathons, and then it goes to 2 marathons, then it goes to 5 marathons, we're into this Ironman stuff, triathlon. At what point do we realize we're just pushing our bodies for what? So, it's, I think, a cultural phenomenon where it's kind of good to push your body, to almost punish it. I don't see that as healthy. So if your doing comes from a place of wanting to punish yourself, I don't see it as healthy. Whereas if it comes from a place of kind of really allowing your body to kind of express itself in different ways, and if there's a connection with your body while you're doing it, then that's great. Because I know people I've worked with who go to the gym, and they're not really connected with their bodies. They're moving their bodies, they're exercising a lot, but they don't bring the awareness of what's happening into the routine or into the pushing weights or whatever it is. So again, going back to that place where we started, that idea of being aware of what's going on. And when you catch yourself pushing your body, you realize, okay, maybe this is not so healthy. I prefer the term stretching. So to stretch yourself, yes, but then there comes a point where you're just kind of pushing and you're being hard on your body. And maybe that's just something that you learned, to be hard on yourself. So the awareness is key. If you bring the awareness in, you're right, Ben, to any exercise, anything at all where your body is moving, then it works. But without the awareness, it can get very unhealthy.
And that's lovely. And like you said, desires are normal and healthy, but it's how we relate to them and how we connect with them. It's the same with the way we're exercising, how aware we are, how we're connecting to it. And I guess that's true for everything we're doing, when we're eating, when we're talking to someone else.
Yeah. If we can bring a quality of awareness to whatever it is, Particularly for me, the easy thing for most people to access is their hearts. If you can bring your heart into it, when you're eating, that your heart is in it. And for me, that means, okay, I'm aware of where the food came from. A lot of the food here, come from the land here. But, if we're buying locally or organic food or whatever, I'm aware that somebody has grown this, and there's a whole chain. And then there's a feeling of connection. And we're so disconnected from the food chain. So maybe bringing the awareness of the heart and that kind of sense of connection into eating makes it a different experience. The same as if you're making love and if your heart is not in it, well, it's just a physical function. You're in your body, and maybe it's great, don't get me wrong, but there's something missing. So opening up maybe the heart a little bit more into anything that you're doing physically brings another dimension.
And we've touched on this already. You've mentioned a few exercises. If someone's listening to this and they're saying, I'm following you, I want to do this more, I kind of getting it in my head what you're talking about, how can I do it? How can I open my heart more today as I go about my day? Or are there any sort of practices or exercises you could share with us that you think are valuable?
Sure. Well, yeah, I suppose we live in a real kind of goal-oriented society, Ben. And listen, I've been there. Obviously, I was in business and so on. And I'm still in business. We own a wellbeing centre in Belfast. But the whole vibe is very different. The feeling around it is very different. So for me, if you want to listen to your heart, you've got to put a little bit of effort in. What I suggest to people that I work with is that, when you get up in the morning, I ask them a simple question: do you have a shower? And of course, most of them say, yeah, of course I have a shower. I say, well, why do you have a shower? And they say, well, I just want to kind of be clean. I want to enter the day fresh. And I say, why? You want to enter the day fresh, physically. But what about psychologically? Because if we don't spend time entering the day fresh, then all the yesterdays come in. So I suggest to people that in the morning, the whole world will program your experience, or your past will program your experience, unless you decide, no, I'm taking charge today. So get up in the morning, have your shower or whatever, and at whatever point it is, see, can you find 5 minutes? That's all you need, 5 minutes for yourself. And it becomes a little ritual. You sit down, if you can, you light a candle, make sure your mobile is off, no laptops, no distractions, close your eyes and tune in and ask yourself a very simple question. How do I want to be today? How do I want to be? How do I want to feel? It's a real kind of heart-based question. So it's not about the goal itself. It's about how do I want to be today? And people come up with answers like, well, just for today, I want to be open. And I say, okay, let's change the I wanting then to I am, because the I am is very, very powerful. So just for today, I am open. And you keep repeating that and you begin to imagine yourself being open. What would that be like if you walked through the whole day being open? And when you get the feeling kind of very deeply in your body, yes, that's what it's like to be open. I ask people to basically put this is a mudra or a hand position or an anchor, where you put their thumb and middle finger together, and you associate this movement of the body, thumb and middle finger, with being open. So when you've got the real feeling of being open, it might take a few minutes. You might have to visualize yourself being open. You might have to play that mental movie. When you really get the feeling, it's like, okay, middle finger and thumb together, and you associate that with being open. And then as you go during the day, whatever's happening during the day, maybe once every hour, Ben, remind yourself by doing this. Oh yeah, open. So you're beginning to program your own day. Now, most people will forget during the day. Well, what was my intention? They might even forget what the intention was. So I say, well, okay, do this, and see, can you remember? And gradually you do begin to remember your intention. And there's some great apps out there where you can have little reminders like the Mindfulness bell. So you get it to chime every hour. And when the little chime comes on your phone, you could be in a meeting, you could be anywhere, you could be out walking, just do this. What was my intention? Oh yeah, open. 3 or 4 breaths, remembering the feeling. And you're beginning then, Ben, to program your day instead of the world kind of setting your emotional tone. So it can be, just for today, I am open. Just for today, I'm gentle on me. Just for today, I am loving. Just for today, I am powerful. Just for today, I am abundant. Whatever it is. And, it will change every day. Often for me, Ben, the same thing comes in maybe 3 or 4 days in a row. So I ask myself the question at the beginning of the intention setting practice, what do I need today? And I get an answer. Oh yeah, just for today, I am strong. And okay, what does that feel like to be strong? Can I imagine Eoin being strong? And then the hand position, and then every hour the bell goes off. Oh yeah, strong. And so then you're beginning to program your day, and you're running your life instead of the world kind of running it for you or your past running it for you. That's a simple one, but it's very, very effective for clients that I work with. They say they have huge changes, particularly after doing this for 2 or 3 months. They realize, wow, I have the power. And that's a great message for people, particularly if you're stuck in any kind of victim consciousness where there's moaning or groaning or blaming. It's like, no, I have the power. Just for today, how do I want to be? So that's useful for most people.
That's a beautiful exercise. Thank you for sharing that. And I like how something you practice, you do it every day, you do it every hour, and it goes back to this idea of you're turning the ship, it's taken around and reprogramming. Eoin, you spoke super eloquently and clearly about this spiritual awakening, the work you do, moving so we can live our lives in a wholer and healthy way. I'd just like to ask you, what are you up to at the moment? Where can we find you? What are you up to? How can we learn a bit more about the HQ process? And
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm up to at the moment actually is I've been kind of soul coaching people for a long time as well, doing one-on-one work. But again, I got a little kind of message a few months ago to drop that. So I'm moving away from that for the rest of this year. We're also moving home. So we're moving out of Northern Ireland. But I'm going to be returning to Ireland and the UK to teach my holistic intelligence process, the HQ process, every year, twice a year. So you can find out more information about the process and how it works on my website. The website is eoinscolard.com. So it's EoinsColard.com/HQ. So HQ is about holistic intelligence. It's about really connecting the mind and the heart and the body. And it's a 5-month process where people engage in a group dynamic. It's a closed group, so the trust levels build and build and build. And I absolutely love working with people over a longer period. I'm working with a group at the moment. I'm seeing them this weekend. It's our 6th full day together. It's a residential course, most of this, where we go away for select weekends over a number of months. And I'm so looking forward to working with them. It doesn't feel like work, and yet there's profound changes happening for everybody. So it's like we're co-creating something wonderful. And I really believe that, Ben, that when we get together with people and when we connect, magic happens. So if you're interested, sure, have a look at the website. There's a YouTube channel there as well. If you just Google Eoin Scolard with the right spelling, you'll find me.
Fantastic. And also I'd like to point out that your book, The Possibility Exists, shows the qualities you demonstrated today and more. It's down to earth, practical, fun, humorous. It's not heavy or academic, or it's approachable and difficult ideas, simple, easy to understand language as well. So I recommend the book as well.
Great, thanks, Ben. Yeah, one of the things that I say to people when I work with them, particularly in groups, is don't forget rule number 6. Which is? And they all say, yeah, well, what's rule number 6? And I say, don't take it too seriously. Just don't take it too seriously. Because even in this work, people can take it seriously. And so I remind them time and time again. Rule number 6. And then eventually somebody pipes up, well, what's the first 5 rules? I say, there aren't any. There's just rule number 6. Don't take it too seriously.
I love that, and I think that's going to be my hourly mindfulness bell today. Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on, Eoin, and it's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, more than I thought I would, which is strange because I'm not usually great in front of cameras, but thank you. It's been very easy.
Yeah.